fall in a later crop, and then you're starting to get in those 50-degree nights and your hormonal products aren't working as well or at all, then you start running into, using, more of a herbicidal type products. And the efficacy goes down when it's cool, and then you get regrowth potential, and depends on how much nitrogen's underneath it, and the list can go on and on. But just being familiar with the whole process of defoliation and how it works can really help you answer those questions.
Welcome to the Crop Science Podcast Show. My name is Brian Arnell, and I'm coming to you from Oklahoma State University. This show is brought to you on behalf of Wysenetics. Today, I'm happy to have a colleague of mine that I've been able to work with quite closely the last couple of years, Dr. Brian Pieralisi. Now, Brian is assistant professor of agronomy, basically the cotton specialist for Mississippi State University. He's the extension specialist, and that's kind of where we cross paths, is on our work with cotton. Brian, thanks for coming to the podcast today or joining us. And why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's always good to talk to you and, get together. But yeah, like you said, I am the cotton specialist. I have a research appointment as well as extension appointment. No stranger to agriculture and farming. Just a brief history about myself. I graduated from Mississippi State in 2000 and went back home to our farm and family farm and did that for a while, about 15 years until my dad retired, went back to school. We have a background in cotton, obviously in Mississippi. That was basically what we grew growing up through probably 2008. And then we switched more to a grain production system. And then, I'm back in the realm of cotton. We moved from the Delta to Starkville about 4 years ago, and have 3 sons and a daughter.
That's a full household right there, Brian.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, not just your responsibilities, but what are some of the projects you're doing as a state cotton specialist?
Okay. Well, let's see. So outside of our variety testing, I have a graduate student. He's a PhD student who's finishing up. He'll probably graduate in August, and he's working on some irrigated and non-irrigated treatments in a drain tile system. And so we're fortunate enough to have some drain tile installed here at the North Farm and in the Delta. And, it's been really interesting just to learn about the drain tile system. I don't know that we were able to capture the true benefits of it due to where it was installed, but I think we are able to deduce that there is a place for it, but outside of a well-drained field, it's not going to help you a whole lot. So that was a project we were working on. He was also doing some, with the whole dicamba situation I guess we had a little foresight, but we're looking at different pre-emergent herbicides and, what combinations can carry us out the furthest, in terms of up to 80% control, like how many days. So we had a system with the pre's, with dicamba. Then it was like peeling an onion. We took dicamba out and had, glyphosate and glufosinate, and then just with glyphosate. And, you could really see the levels of control and then the impacts on yield. And so that's one guy. Then I have 3 master students. One of them's finishing up about the same time, and he's going to continue on with a PhD. He's looking at row spacings and plant populations. And the row spacing is wide row, just almost like a 1-by-1. And we're doing some work with banded potassium. And we're also doing simulated physical damage, whether it be deer or hail. And the same student also has a a replant scenario, replant decisions. And so we got a pretty good bit going on.
You got quite a bit, which so I guess part of what I like to do on some of these podcasts is dive into kind of the work life or what different areas do, and I think you described well what a state cotton specialist, or really sometimes a state commodity specialist, will be. Is that, Brian? It doesn't sound like you are necessarily a specialist of a science. You are a jack of all trades, because on your list I got drought tile drainage, so agronomy. You got OVT, so you're looking at cultivars, productivity. You got dicamba herbicide work, so you're a weed scientist. You got row spaces and population, which goes back to the traditional agronomy about, how are we growing. You got to throw in the banded potassium, so now you're soil fertility specialist, and then throw in the physical damage through deer and hail, and so now you're kind of a plant physiologist. So the cotton specialist isn't just one thing, right? I mean, you kind of have to handle a whole crop. How do you deal with that? I'm a little bit, I'm not like you. I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades, but some of our research brethren specialize in a very, very small area, right? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
You don't.
Well, it goes back to I had someone tell me a long time ago, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And then it goes back to what you know again, and then who you know again. So we have to be a jack of all trades, and you have to know what you're talking about, but you also need to know who to rely on, or resources that could be available. And then you find that you learn a lot of stuff along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a state specialist in a crop, the farmers don't tend to just come to you with just certain questions, right? They hit you with everything, irregardless if they know your academic background. And so you kind of have to be at least well versed. You have to at least start diving into you got to start wading into the pool where you can call upon somebody to then dive in, right?
That's right. And what I found, and you probably have too, by the time a question gets to you, it's probably been through a lot of other people, and it's never just an easy one.
No. So in Mississippi and the cotton production realm, what would you say is some of your most common questions you get from the field?
I would say it falls into three categories. You got your early season questions, mid-season, and then probably the most would be defoliation. Early season, it's usually a replant or some kind of a stand issue, or maybe a herbicide reaching back, or something along those lines. A little bit of fertility stuff, but not a whole lot of that. And if I get that, it's usually in the fall or prior to planting. And then I get a lot of questions about variety response with PGR, and just managing nodal distances, and what should I apply on this variety, and how aggressive. And, that goes back to there's a lot of things that go into that: the variety, the environment, the vegetative growth potential. So it's good to know you got to know these varieties pretty well, and there's such a turnover. A lot of times you hadn't had a good look at them, so that can be challenging. And then, like I said, I get a lot of defoliation questions, and that changes from year to year. And
so actually, it was a little bit shocked that you said defol was kind of one of your big things. One because this is a pretty broad reaching. Describe a little bit what you mean by defol and why is its importance, and what are some of the challenges we may encounter with defoliation of cotton crop.
Okay. Well, in Mississippi, in our region, for one thing, our environment can change a lot. We can have an early fall, we can have a late fall. If we have an early crop and the temperatures are warm, we can rely on hormonal products. It's easy. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But the problem you run into, first of all, you might have hurricanes come in. If you have an early fall and a later crop, and then you're starting to get in those 50-degree nights, and your hormonal products aren't working as well or at all, then you start running into, using more of a herbicidal type products. And it's, the efficacy goes down when it's cool, and then you get regrowth potential, and depends on how much nitrogen's underneath it, and it the list can go on and on. But just being familiar with the whole process of defoliation and how it works can really help you answer those questions.
So we just, and I'll just kind of say this. So we like to defoliate. We want the leaf to drop off that cotton plant. So when the stripper or the pickers come through there's less trash that enters after that harvest, and clean out is easier. The quality of the product is better. We were just talking some samples I sent to you. We had a disastrous year trying to get defoliation on one of our locations that we never challenged with that. We just couldn't get it to drop. Kind of got the leaves locked on, and as you mentioned, we had a pretty trashy product there. With these questions you get on defol, are they after the fact? Are these the questions that they've made the decision, or do you get much heads up? Does that question make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, I get both. Sometimes it's a scenario. It's like, I have a really drought suffering crop. What do you think is the best option? What's going to work the best? Or, it could be, look, we applied this, we got a rain within 24 hours. The next 3 days look like this. What should I do? So it's a little bit of both. And then sometimes you'll get, look, we've put 2 applications out. Nothing's worked. What should we do? We're trying not to spend a whole lot of extra money. So it's all over the board. And then every now and then it's perfect. But
Yeah.
Sometimes you get half of your crop that's just perfect, and then you get to the end and you're like, can't get it, can't make it happen.
And I want to go back to, because cotton for me is a really interesting crop. Of course, in Oklahoma, I get to work with all the crops. So I've got wheat, corn, soy. Cotton's one of those that I work with that I have a love-hate relationship with it, because I sometimes can't get it to live for the first 30 days, and then I can't kill it or get it to drop. So it's one of those. But cotton's an intriguing cat for me, because it's the one crop that we manage, at least in this region, just the most, right? So, and what I'm saying this for is bringing up the PGR comment that you had, plant growth regulators. Spend just give me a 2-minute synopsis of why plant growth regulators are important and even essential in cotton production in the Mid-South.
Okay. Well, that's a very good question. We've learned to rely on PGRs and plant growth regulators, and some of that comes from, almost an insurance from the fact of putting out making sure you have enough nitrogen, and then, that's going to make plants grow, and along those lines, starting to see a trend in reduced nitrogen rates. But we have so many mechanisms of loss. And so some of our rates are almost a safety net for making sure you have enough out there. If it gets wet, volatilization, denitrification, we have a lot of different mechanisms. So, and that's not the sole reason why we use plant growth regulators. We also have a lot of different varietal growth habits. We have a lot of fertility, different soil types, and those interactions where, a variety in a field might have a lot more vegetative growth potential versus, say, that same variety in another soil with less vegetative growth potential. That goes back to planting date. It goes back to the environment, irrigation, just rain showers you might have gotten. So all of those things play into it. So you kind of have to take a step back and look at all those things and say, make almost an educated guess on what you think needs to happen. And you also, what I've noticed, a lot of growers and some consultants, they always bring up, well, last year it got away from me and I had to stand on it. So my advice is you can't do any defoliation, PGR, any of that based on last year. You got to base it on this year and what's going on.
So for those that don't know about cotton, why do we control the vegetative growth? I mean, why not let the plants get big? Why keep node length? And when we're talking node length, it's the distance between basically branches, if you want to really break it down. Why do we want to keep that short? And why do we want to hold the plant back from growing to its full vegetative potential?
Yeah. So my answer to that would be it's a couple of things. If you can put that energy towards fruit production and, bulb development growth, that's, if you take that energy and put it towards a whole lot of vegetative, you're not only going to have less yield, but you're going to have less harvest efficiency. And when you're running through there with these big pickers, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time. You don't want a lot of choke ups. And, it's just harvest efficiency and more, and then have more to harvest. So it's indirectly related. A lot of times, if you do a PGR trial, you're rarely going to see yield separation, but it's an indirect, yield increaser.
Yep. It goes back to like the default conversation, right? So a lot of things that we're doing in a cotton crop is actually to make harvest more efficient, and not just harvest efficiency, but harvest quality. Because with cotton, unlike any other crop that I'm really aware of, slightly are grains, but cotton growers get paid by quality, right, Brian?
Yeah,
in a way, indirectly.
In a way, yes.
Yep. Can you talk about loan and link quality and some of those parameters on how that works and why that's something that farmers try to pay attention to?
Yeah. So, quality is very important, especially when it comes down to the loan value. And we plug all of our OVT data into a loan calculator and get a loan value for that variety. And so there's a sweet spot, if you want to keep it simple, between all those parameters, whether it be mic, uniformity, length, strength. There's a sweet spot for all that stuff, and the algorithm generates a loan value. And so the higher your loan value, the more attractive it is for a broker or buyer to want to buy it versus settling for the loan value. And there's a lot of things that you do throughout the year that affect that, whether it be, if you have a hot, dry year, it affects your mic. If you're late defoliating, if you're early, if a hurricane comes in and it influences the color, there's a lot of different things in there. But, and I'm by no means a specialist on the, I dabble in, fiber quality and loan value. Get an economist in here to give you the exact breakdown, but I know enough to probably get myself in trouble.
All right, so today we've got Dr. Brian Pieralisi. He's assistant professor at Mississippi State University, and he is the cotton extension specialist. And Brian's been going through some of the work he's doing. And one of them that the listener should know that every year at the Beltwide Cotton Conference, there's a group of individuals that meet. That's the state cotton specialist. As a soil fertility guy, I'm really not invited to that. I got to peek into their little world this last Beltwide. And one of the conversations that I was not prepared for that got quite in depth was something, Brian, you mentioned you work on, physical damage from deer. All right. Now, like I said, I've been growing cotton since 07, 08. I think my first trial might have been 05. I'll put it that way. So I've been playing around with cotton for about 20 years. Deer has not been one of the things that I looked as my primary predator or something to worry about. Has it always been that way?
It has not. It's interesting to me. Like I said, I grew up on a cotton farm. We had a crop mix. We had some beans. Started planting corn in the late 90s. And we have deer on our farm. And I don't remember deer ever touching the cotton. Not at all. And here recently, I don't know if it's a byproduct of more deer or what it is, but I would say it's one of the more damaging pests in cotton in many of our cotton producing areas. Mainly, I would say in the central, eastern, and northern part of the state where you have smaller fields surrounded by forested areas. But it's a major problem, and I mean, we have growers that are, I mean, their life is miserable because they farm all day and are up all night trying to keep deer out of their fields. Fencing works to some degree. There's a lot of spray on products. You hear all kind of stuff, but there's a critical time in there where if they bite the top off of it, it's a replant scenario. And I mean, 20-acre field, they can mow it down in no time.
So are they foraging on the cotton during the entire growing season, or is it just the early stage? Do you see them come in there during bloom and boll load?
I'm not going to say they don't go in there, but once you get to that point, you're okay. It's just getting it established. You know how it is. You just mentioned it earlier. It's like it wants to die. When you have cotyledon cotton, it's pretty much lights out at that point. Once you get up to I'll see them up till I'd say 12 node cotton, and then it gets past it. But there's a pretty time sense. I mean, where we're trying to assess the damage is when it doesn't kill it, and it's between 4 and 12 nodes. And what does that mean, and what level? Because we're looking at it about 3 different damage levels, which is still simulated, but we're trying to get the closest we can get.
Well, I mean, I can just envision, especially if you're talking cotyledon cotton. So you got a small plant, they're in rows anywhere between 30 and 40 inches wide. You put a herd of 20 to 40 deer, which is pretty easy on a 20-acre patch down south. You put that and they just walk in a line, and overnight, now you've just lost a field, much like, we do. You too, hogs in corn and beans will go down row and can devastate us in a short period of time.
Yeah. Well, I would say it's been gaining momentum over the past 4 to 5 years. It was kind of like we're seeing deer in our cotton pretty good, and it's worse. And then now it's every year. It's like, what are we going to do?
So the discussion during the meeting was, is this shift due to increased deer population or increased cotton acreage or lack of access to maybe soy and corn recently? You got any kind of hot take on that? You mentioned the deer pop, but you have any other rationale of why you might see this increase?
I've listened to Camp Hand. He's doing a lot of work with this, University of Georgia. And he's had some data that showed, a soybean buffer on the edge of the cotton field, and the deer just kind of walk right through it and pick the cotton. Not that they won't eat beans; they're still eating soybeans too. But I don't know of a rationale outside of there's something that might be more attractive. I've heard people throw out gossipal levels and things like that, but I don't know that to be true.
All right, so kind of switching gears now, moving out of deer, but I love hunting, so that's kind of why I got on that one. The row space and population work that you're doing, what is the traditional row space? Are you trying to move that or just reevaluate population? What's that work kind of digging into?
Well, we were trying to look at, with increased costs, just ways to maintain profitability. And by keeping a down the road population the same and widening it, getting wider where you can plant less seed on an acre, where is the breaking point on, profitability? And so we have our traditional row spacing is 38, I'd say 38-inch rows, some 40, and that's in cotton. But we're definitely been a shift to ingrain a lot of 30-inch corn, 30-inch soybeans. So some of that rationale would be, what if we had one row spacing that's 30 inches and we planted cotton on 60, grain on 30, or we did 38 and 76, which, same net result, but you're getting pretty wide.
That's a big row.
That's a big row.
It's a lot of open ground for weeds to grow too.
And that's one of the major hurdles, and especially with, like I mentioned, the dicamba situation. You really got to be aggressive in pre's. But we saw number one, in a wet year, our wide row outperformed the regular standard. In a dry year, the 38-inch solid outperformed that. So for a master's project, it was a moot point, right? But we did learn that, and then from a population standpoint, which kind of helped feed our other project, we were able to go down. We didn't see any separation even at a low population, and that was not seeding rates. Like, we actually thinned it to, we had actual plants out there, and so we were able to go 15,000 plants per acre, which was 7,500 on a wide row, and still maintain yield. But that, we're careful by saying we don't want to advertise planting low like that. But if you're in a situation to where you're uniform and you end up with that, we're just trying to see where it helps you make that decision.
You move out west, you start visiting with the low pop mafia, man, and we start talking low pop is where we go. It's intriguing. You talk about the wide rows and others are going narrow. I look, in Oklahoma cotton production, our traditional cotton ground is on 40s because it's bedded and irrigated that way. Our second level of also traditional is on 36 because it's peanut ground. So the peanuts are on 36 and they just want one planter, so the cotton's there. And now we got new ground. We picked up, 250,000 acres of cotton ground in the last couple of years in old corn ground. So that's on 30s. It really works out, though, that it works well in each environment. The 40 ground and 36 ground tends to be a little bit more humid. We get a little bit bigger plant. As we move into the 30s, we're much in a drier climate. Water's much more limited, so our plants are more compact. And so we can't really pull that wide rows in that drier ground because the plants don't really grow, right? So we don't get massive trees. In fact, some of the land I sent you this year, my best yielding cotton was on 30s. It broke 5 bale. And if you would have looked at it from afar, I mean, we didn't have rows over. You could walk down at harvest, you could walk down 30-inch row spacings and really barely tickle your legs on either side, because we just had these little compact plants that were just nothing but a big old bowl of cotton, which was beautiful. My other cotton that I sent you that was all leafed out, man, that was a jungle on 36s where we had vines. It looked like down the rainforest, just how viney and overgrown it was on 36-inch row spacing. And that was probably about a bale less in that production system than the high plains. So row spacing in an environment is always an interesting aspect that I look at.
Yeah. Whenever you sent me those yields, and I was blown away. I mean, it looked like seed cotton, but it was lint. I mean, for it to be that short, that's just wild.
Yeah, we were hoping for 2 bale just by the look of the plant until we started getting out there, and because that location's about 4 hours away from us, so I don't get to walk it every day. I just get pictures, and you get a picture of that little short plant about peak bloom, and you're like, man, well, there goes what was hoping for be a good year.
Yeah, well, it turned out.
So I guess the last work I want to kind of hit on a little bit is the banded potassium work, because potassium cotton has been a thing. Shoot, it's been something in the news ever since I was a grad student back in the early 2000s. You found any answers yet, Brian?
Loaded question, man. Well, now I'll tell you what, we have 4 varieties, and then based on our soil test rate, we have what it recommended, and then half of that either broadcast or banded. And the banded is like it's a hopper rig that has coulters, and it just applies it. No differences, but it goes back to, the way I interpret it is the cotton, if it can, it's going to forage for whatever it can, and it's going to make whatever it makes, if it's enough there for it to make it. But over time, if you're not putting anything out there, you can, it's just like your checking account. If you don't have a job and you're not putting money in there. So we didn't see any separation. And I would say our soil was moderate to low, medium to medium soil test K.
Well, I was hoping you solved the problem. We tend, and I'm honestly, I'm chasing the problem in soybean because it's on farm, and I've yet to figure out how to easily haul a cotton stripper around the state of Oklahoma from border to border. It just doesn't work out as well as a small plot combine.
It's tough, man. You don't have to tell me.
But, looking at just the spatial variance where we pick up potassium deficiencies in ground that we should not, based upon soil test, and then get in ground that should respond like gangbusters to potassium, the plant just looks gorgeous. And so we're trying to chase down some of that stuff. I'm using cotton or soybean as my proxy for cotton. I really want to do cotton work, so I don't know if it's Tyson Raper or somebody. I need like a mobile cotton stripper that I could haul up and down the highways without a CDL.
Well, he's got a sweet picker for hauling up and down the road, but it's a spindle
that
picker.
little trike system.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get him on the podcast someday. Well, Brian, we're going to wrap up here. I greatly appreciate you coming on. I want to wrap up with our 3 questions I hit everybody with, and so
it's time for our famous 3. Explore the future of agriculture with KWS, a global leader in innovation and sustainable farming practices. Uncover the exceptional qualities of our hybrid rye, cultivating a legacy for a greener tomorrow. Visit kws.com/US for more information and for dealer locations. KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
When you have a question or a problem at work, what's your go-to work resource when it comes to cotton?
Colleagues, Tyson Raper is one I go to a lot. If it's a plant disease or weed issue, I hit up our state specialist. Just find somebody who I think knows if I don't know.
Second question. With all your free time, Brian, what do you do? What's your leisurely activity of choice?
This time of year, it'd be turkey hunting. And with so much free time, it used to be a very big passion of mine, but I still go every chance I get.
I was about to say, I pre-children, I love spring turkey season. Post-children, that springtime turkey season got a lot less outings, and we're getting back into it now.
Okay. I have fond memories of turkey hunting. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. Finally, so folks want to know more about the Pieralisi project and what you guys are doing down in Mississippi cotton. Where do they go? Where do they find more information about you?
Well, they can always email me directly. I'm pretty easy to find. Mississippi crop situation, any kind of thing we put up there on the blog, or any of my variety trials. And like I said, that's probably the 2 easiest ways to get in touch with me.
All right. Well, folks, this is Dr. Brian Pieralisi. He is the Cotton Extension Specialist with Mississippi State University. We greatly appreciate his time and Wisenetics for allowing us to do this crop science podcast. So, folks, man, if you liked what you heard today, hit the subscribe, follow the channel, share with your friends. Shoot, even if they're not your friends, share the podcast so we get some legs on this thing. If you leave us a comment, let us know what you want to learn about, who you want to see as a guest, and if you have any additional questions for Dr. Pieralisi or myself, feel free to reach out. With that, Brian, thanks again for coming on today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Good talking to you.